Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to trace the life story of a really powerful idea, one that shapes pretty much everything, from what gets you out of bed in the morning to the way countries are drawn on a map. And that idea is self-determination.
So, let's just start with this question. It's something we all wonder about, right? This entire explainer is going to get to the heart of it by unpacking that one single concept, self-determination. We're going to explore what it actually means, where it even came from, and why it's so fundamental to, well, to being human.
You know, the story of self-determination actually starts centuries ago. It begins with one of the biggest, oldest philosophical arguments of all time. Basically, is our fate already written for us, or do we get to write it ourselves?
At the very center of this whole debate was this idea of determinism. And what that means is, it's the view that all of our actions are just the unavoidable effects of things that happened before. So in other words, everything that happens was always going to happen.
And this is where the argument gets really juicy. So you've got one side, the hard determinists, who basically saw us as dominoes in a long chain reaction. For them, free will, it's just an illusion. But the soft determinists on the other side, they saw things differently. They argued that an action can be both caused and free. And here's their key point. Just because your choice has a cause, that doesn't mean you were forced to make it. There's a big difference there.
This way of thinking was laid out beautifully by the philosopher John Locke, who was a big proponent of soft determinism. Way back in 1690, he was one of the first thinkers to formally connect this idea of freedom with a new term he called self-determination. He saw it as the bridge that connects what we want to what we do.
Okay, let's fast forward a couple hundred years. The whole debate kind of moves out of the philosophy department and into the brand new field of psychology. Psychologists inherited this ancient question and gave it a whole new scientific spin. So the focus shifted. It wasn't so much about God and fate anymore. Now, it was a scientific battle between what drives us. Is it internal forces, like our own thoughts and will? Or is it all about external forces, like our environment and how we've been conditioned?
On one side of this new debate, you had behaviorists like B.F. Skinner. This guy was a modern-day hard determinist. He basically argued that our feeling of being in control is just an illusion. He thought our actions are shaped completely by our environment and our past, and he even called the idea of an autonomous man a superstition. But, of course, there was another side. You had personality psychologists like Andras Anghel pushing back. He argued in 1941 that autonomy, being governed from the inside, isn't a superstition at all. He saw it as a fundamental part of life itself. The ability for any living thing to push back against the outside world.
So you have this huge tension, right? Internal versus external control. And that whole debate really set the stage for what would become one of the most important modern theories of motivation in all of psychology.
All right, now let's dive into the really groundbreaking work of Edward Deci and Richard Bryan. These two psychologists took this question that had been bouncing around for centuries and just decided to tackle it head-on. They built an entire theory around it.
What they came up with is what we call self-determination theory, or SDT. And here's the really brilliant move they made. They reframed self-determination. They said it's not a philosophical problem we have to solve. Instead, it's a fundamental, universal human need, just like we need food or connection. They call it an organistic theory because they see this drive for control as a natural, built-in part of being a living, growing person.
The whole theory is really built on this powerful but simple idea. To be intrinsically motivated, to do something just because you love it, we need two key ingredients. First, a sense of autonomy, that feeling that you're in the driver's seat. And second, a sense of competence, that feeling that you're actually good at it. The theory also shows just how crucial our environment is, because it can either feed our motivation by supporting these needs, or it can totally crush it by being too controlled. Okay, so here's the most important part. This isn't just some abstract theory you'd read about in a textbook. The idea of self-determination has had a massive, tangible impact on the real world.
This idea just completely exploded out of academia. It became a political principle for Woodrow Wilson after World War I. It was a rallying cry for the disability rights movement in the 70s. And by the 90s, it was a core goal in special education. And in these real-world movements, self-determination became this incredibly powerful tool for change. It grew from a concept about what motivates us inside to a fundamental human right, the right for people to have meaningful control over their own lives and their own futures.
And man, this quote from disability rights leader Robert Williams just says it all, doesn't it? He put it so powerfully. For so many people fighting for their rights, self-determination isn't some complicated theory. It's just another word for freedom.
So as you can see, the story of this one idea really mirrors our own deep, ongoing human need for agency. It's a journey from a philosophical question about fate to a psychological need for control, and then, finally, to a universal right for all of us to be the authors of our own lives.
So we'll leave you with this final thought. Now that you've heard the long and powerful history of this idea, how can you use it? What's one small choice you can make today to feel just a little more in control, a little more capable, and a little more truly self-determined in your own life?